So, you were obviously alive during the 1960s and 70s, right?
Yes, I was.
So, what was your overall opinion on the whole Vietnam War situation?
Well, since I had been involved with the Korean War, which was the Cold War, I wasn't in favor of the Vietnam War at all.
Okay, so
I thought it was a silly type of thing to have another Korean confrontation. You know, why were we there? And nobody could ever have a good reason. During the Korean War, people didn't object to that war as much as they did the Vietnam War. There was a lot of objections to the Vietnam War because of the thinking that it was an unnecessary type of, what do I want to call it, confrontation with the Vietnamese people. So it's a little different than the Korean situation. But there were a lot of conscientious objectors to the Vietnam War. There were a lot of people that went to we were concerned about David, our son. And if he had gotten drafted, we talked, Jen, mother and I talked about going up to Canada to avoid the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
Because we objected to it that much.
All right. So you were involved in the Korean War.
Yes.
What did you do with that?
What do you mean?
How were you involved?
Well, I was drafted. I was number one draftee. There were 10 of us who were first draftees in the Korean War because of my age. I was an older. They started drafting the older groups first, at 26 and under, and so I was just 26. So I got drafted in the Korean War. I missed World War II by going to school. At the end of World War II, I was going to be drafted in World War II. However, in 1945, they gave some of us an opportunity to go to college and take ROTC in lieu of the war, in lieu of being drafted in the war, because the war was winding down. There was not much left at the end of World War II in 1945. So I elected to go to college and take ROTC. What they said at that time was, well, if you go take ROTC, then you've got to go 4 years to become an officer. Well, after 2 years, I didn't want to become an officer, so I never went the other 2 years. And they never came after me. They never said anything more. So then I went to school, and I then became graduated college, and then in September of 1950 was drafted for the Korean War. And I'd been out of school about 3 or 4 months and got drafted. And I was very fortunate to be stationed in Washington, D.C. at Fort Belvoir for what they call the engineer school. So I became a building instructor for theater of operation type construction for the Korean War.
Okay.
So I was very fortunate not to have to go to Korea. My first thoughts of going to Korea that I wasn't going to come back. I thought for sure I'd be killed there. If you read the history of the Korean War at the very beginning,
Yeah.
it was a. I think I've told you this before, maybe. We're talking about the Korean War, the Vietnam War, but we'll get into the Vietnam War too. We were not prepared for the type of conditions in Korea. Well, we didn't have enough people, we didn't have enough military, and so what happened is we'd fight going up to the 38th parallel, which divides North Korea from South Korea. We couldn't go into North Korea. We could only protect South Korea. So we'd go up to the 38th parallel, what they call the 38th parallel, and then we'd fight them up, going up, and then we'd retreat, come back. We'd go up. It was a battle of retreating and going forward, advancing. That first part of the Korean War. But I was very fortunate not to have to go to Korea, because I would have been ill-trained in the military to fight, because there was such short notice.
Yeah.
Of being drafted, getting your training, and then going over to Korea. I was not regular Army. I was what they call the U.S., which is your serial number is U.S. for an R.A. Meant you were drafted U.S. and R.A. was regular Army. So anyway, then the Vietnam War came, and I was a little older, and I was concerned about, as I said, our David being drafted, going to a war that I didn't believe in. I know I didn't object to it. I didn't outwardly go into to any kind of confrontation with the government or anything like that. Like an objectionable thing, you know, where you spoke out and publicly talked about it, how bad it was.
Okay.
But your dad was more about the Vietnam War,
Yeah.
so he can speak for that. But as an outsider looking into the Vietnam War, I was totally against it because politically, I didn't think we belonged there. Militarily, I didn't think we belonged there, and so I totally objected to it.
Did any of the
No,
protests?
that's what I was saying. I never participated in protests. Silently, I protested,
Okay.
not publicly. I talked with my friends about it, but not publicly.
So did your son David ever protest at all? Was he ever involved
David
in
never
that?
did, no.
Okay. So, would you say that you're part of the sort of mainstream population, or are you part of like?
Oh, I was definitely part of the mainstream. I think there were probably lots of people that objected like I did and didn't publicly go protesting. When they talked about it going into Cambodia, remember during the Vietnam War, they talked about going into Cambodia, and that was a no-no to me. Why would we go any further than Vietnam if we were there? Why go further than that? Cambodians were I thought at that time they were friends of ours. I'm not sure that was a true statement.
So, were you ever like involved in any sort of event during that time, like large event? Not.
As I said, I protested silently, we'll call it. But if you protest silently, it means you're not really protesting.
Yeah.
You know.
So, what was your opinion on like the political, the politicians and the political?
I thought they were
offices?
wrong in trying to. Another situation where we gained anything from it politically, you know. What did we really do? What did we solve over there? What did we resolve, you know? It's almost like the Korean situation. What did we really resolve in the Korean situation? Except there still is a 38th parallel. Today there's still a division between North Korea and South Korea. Whereas South Korea is more of a democratic country. North Korea is a very dictatorship type thing. They're not allowed to exchange. You know, I was over in Korea just in the 70s. You know, I went over there for a trip. We couldn't go into North Korea. We were stopped there. We had a Korean guide, we had Korean people with us, and they took us up to the border where the North Koreans had guards. You couldn't, you know, they'd shoot you if you went across that. If you crossed that border, they'd shoot you. Or when I say shoot, they really would shoot you, but they would look at you very suspiciously. And the same thing with Vietnam. You know, why were we there? I saw no reason for us to be there.
All right.
Is that it?
I think that's about it.
What more did you want me to say? Did you want me to talk more about Vietnam?
Actually, I think that is